This will be fun. It is time for an incredibly serious discussion about literature and film. What's this? It's two copies of the same intellectual property, sort of, but actually no, because this is the original book, and this is a television movie film. Directed by others. It's exciting. What's the difference between Howl's Moving Castle and a Howl's Moving Castle? And then this is the part where there's a segment, so like Howl's Moving Castle. So a lot of people are saying that Howl's Moving. So a lot of people have been telling me that Howl's Moving Castle, the book, is very, very different from Howl's Moving Castle, the film. This is sort of true on some level. For instance, Howl's Moving Castle, the book, has a lot of... So Howl's Moving Castle is a story about magic and wizards and stuff, but more directly, it's a story about like aesthetics and magic as a form of artifice to try and explore the idea of identity and how it intersects with a show of identity. This is not well written. Maybe I should write this. Hey, look at this wicked cool bullet that I found. It's from the war. Isn't that neat? Wow.
And it has a partially completed degree in illustration.
Today we're going to be talking about the nature of adaptation through the lens of two things, the same thing. But what? These are actually different. What if I told you there was a completely different... This is Howl's Moving Castle, a 2004... 6... 2000... This is Howl's Moving... This is Howl's... So a lot of people have been saying that Howl's Moving Castle, the movie, and Howl's Moving Castle, the book, are very different to each other. And I could sort of agree. I mean, for one, this one has no pictures, but I would argue that they are actually very similar stories with a few key differences. I was really worried there because I was like, where is my bookmark? And then I was like, I finished this book. That's right. I read a children's book. I read all 328 pages of it, and I read it. No, I don't need a bookmark. That's great. Okay. So, Howl's Moving Castle? More like Howl's Moving... Asshole. Ha, saved that one. Okay. So Howl's Moving Castle is a children's book about wizards and magic and witches and all sorts of good shit. But more than that, it's a story about... This is not a good look for me. Howl's Moving Castle is about using... What was I going to say? It's about using, like, the esteemed literary tradition of magic and fantasy to explore the key theme of vanity and artifice. How is this done? No more apparent than in the characters of protagonist girl lady Sophie, who lives a plain and sad life because of her own self-image, etc. And then Howl, who is, by contrast, a vain dweeb who sucks. But maybe we can explore this in the way the plot and the macro text explores this. Now is a good time for us to segue into what I would like to call an exploration of medium part 2. This is I feel a lot more uncomfortable when I'm on the camera, let's be real. What you may have noticed, one of these things is a book, and the other one is a Japanese anime, which means that one of them is going to be exploring things through prose, and the other one through pretty fucking pictures. It's almost like this was a really good idea for an adaptation. Looking at you, Tales from Earthsea. So, it's pretty cool that they did that. So I think where a lot of people say that the story of Howl's Moving Castle is different in the book is because many of the ways the themes are explored here are much more plot-centric. For instance, tiny boy Michael is actually an adult man with a whole lovesick relationship arc in this version of the story, and this is because exploring the nature of vanity and how looks can be deceiving is a lot easier to do with Shakespearean comedy style hijinks in a book, and a lot easier to do with like some fucking guy turning into. A lot of this is communicated thematically through like just imagery, which I think really elevates the narrative. Sorry, Diana Wynn Jones, you were cool. Anyway, what was I gonna say aside from this? Did you know that Howl is played by Gene Simmons? Maybe? Whoa. Did you know Josh Hutcherson is a little boy in this? That's fucking crazy. Look at the camera, Linda, don't look at yourself. Okay. What was I gonna say? Like, I was gonna make some points. I was gonna make some points. Probably write some notes. I think next time, I'm gonna write some notes. I have actual things to do. This is ridiculous. Why am I doing this? I have like legitimate things to do today, which I'm not going to do. And part of the reason for me not doing that is me making a pretend video about Howl's Moving Castle. Okay. It's a very good point, Lyndon. What was I gonna say about Howl's Moving Castle? It's gonna be like, For instance, in the Studio Ghibli film, which we probably, let's be real, all know the original narrative through this adaptation. It's bigger, you've seen it, you've probably not read this. If you have, you are a cool person. Neat. But the film makes a lot of departures from the narrative at around about the midpoint. For instance, about halfway through the book, it turns out that Howl is just a Welshman who needs to grow up and is hiding out in a magical fantasy land. Whereas in Howl's Moving Castle, the Ghibli version, this doesn't happen, even ever. It's like he's just his own dude, which is interesting. It's a bit of a textual change, bit of a departure there. Additionally, things like the true identity of the Witch of the Waste and who's who and lots of who's in this version of the story are largely omitted from Howl's Moving Castle, the normal version, on account of how they wanted to streamline the narrative and they didn't think it was really important because what was more important was feeling. Hey, dude, this is based on the book by Welsh author Diana Wynn Jones, Howl's Moving Castle is an epic tale of adventure and imagination. That's really cool. Why am I wearing this hat? It's almost like it's a coda for the theme of appearances and deception. That's one of the words I was looking for. Let's just write down some nice words. So we got artifice, deception. We got like so I think it's pretty neat that this movie exists